I'm going to provide an overview of troubleshooting FreeSurfer output. This would be part of the quality control. And for this, I am already on HiPerGator. And I have this file called adme_fs.zip. That is something that is available in the share folder within the class drive. And I have already copied it into my own subjects directory, as we can see the path up here. And so now I'm going to unzip that file, and this is going to have various brains from the ADNI database that I've processed using FreeSurfer. So I can open in terminal, and then that will load. And then the first thing I always like to do is get oriented. So in this case, I'm going to list the contents of the directory. I can type pwd and just show that we are where we expect to be. And I'd list the contents of the directory. So to unzip that, I can type unzip and then ADNI. I'm going to tab to autocomplete, and I can press enter. Now this should be fairly quick to unzip. Again, what I recommend is if you're going to do anything extended and extended processing on HiPerGator, you need either submit a script, or you can do what's called an interactive development process. And there are ways to do that. I won't show that at this point. But this is fast enough to do that it won't take very long. And so we'll let that go. But what I'm going to pull over on the screen is this is information. So this is linked to in the module for the class for this week. And this is the troubleshooting your output. Now there are multiple options for this. You can use the data that we processed for last week. So you can go through one of the brains and try to find something to fix, and that would be good. Or you can use the tutorial data. And this is from FreeSurfer. So the tutorial data is, I have the link to this already in the module, but the tutorial data set would be here. If you're not at an organized course, which organized course in this case, meaning the courses that the FreeSurfer team will offer typically once or twice a year. And but there's this tutorial data set. You can click on that, and then you can run this command. So copy this command. And where would you put this? So copy, I am in my subjects directory that I have created. This is in my share folder, in the share, and then my folder, and then subjects. And so this is where I'm putting FreeSurfer subjects process that we're doing. And so I could paste that in, hit enter, return, and it would download. So this is going to fetch from this URL, and then it'll save as this tutorial data tar.gzip. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to use the tutorial data for this, but if you want to, you can. So that would download. It would take a little while to download. And so that's actually something I would recommend doing in a little script. It would be very easy. You have your header information for the script. You change into this directory. You run that command, and then you run the two other commands that are shown here. The tar, that will extract the data, and then you can remove this tar.gzip. You don't have to do that, but again, it cleans up and will free up some storage space. And then what you want to do is right here, you can export tutorial data, or you can do it the other way where so you can export that, but then you also want to export the subjects directory. And in this case, it's showing an example like that. And so this would be what you would run, meaning here, if you're using these tutorial data, you would export tutorial data, and it would be at this main location like this link shows. So again, whatever the path to the tutorial directory is, and that would just be this overall directory. And then export your subjects directory. You need to change that to where it is, and that can be your main subjects directory. But in this case, it's probably best if you were following these methods using these tutorial data, then you would want to make it this whole path all the way down to tutorial subjects. Again, subjects directory is a variable that is set by FreeSurfer, so you do have to load FreeSurfer first. And so I will show that. Again, I'm not going to do anything. So I can just do module load FreeSurfer. And in this case, I'm going to use 7.1.1. And I just want to show you, I'm going to echo subjects dir. And that's apps FreeSurfer 7.1.1/subjects. So that is a location on HiPerGator that we have no access to write to. So that's why we need to set a subjects directory somewhere else. So in this case, I have the subjects in here. Again, this add FreeSurfer zip. I had unzipped it. And now these are the different subjects here in this directory. So in my case, I'm going to export subjects dir to my current directory. There are multiple ways to do that. I can do blue, CLP7934, I can do that whole path, or I can use the $sign and PWD in capital letters like that. So now this is a variable that stands for present working directory, and I can do that. And what that will do is it'll set subjects directory. So now if we look back at this command, I did echo subjects directory before, and I got apps FreeSurfer 7.1.1/subjects. I'm going to run that same command. I hit the up arrow on my keyboard, and I run that, and now it is blue CLP7934 share JJ Tanner subjects. So I have changed subjects directory. Now, HiPerGator, we're going to check output, so I'm not going to use command line for all of this, meaning we need to open up a graphic user interface. And in this case, we're going to use FreeView, which is their GUI software, the software for viewing images. But I was just showing this because that's going to be a method for running some of these quality control things. And so that could also be done in a script. Now, what I'm going to do is start a FreeView session. So I had clicked on interactive apps. I went down to FreeView. There are multiple ways to do this. You can go through the console. You can go through FreeView. There are pluses and minuses to both. I'm just going to take the shortcut to FreeView. And I just want to make sure, so 7.1.1 is fine, and then 1 core is fine, everything else. I'm going to increase to 8 gigabytes of RAM. 6 should be okay, but 8 is going to just give us a little bit of buffer. I use the class account. In this case, I'm going to request 4 hours. It won't take that long, but I will request 4 hours because I can kill the job afterward. And then make sure I'm on the GUI partition. And that should be sufficient for this. So I'm going to hit launch. And now this is submitting a script to HiPerGator is really what it's doing. It's just a shortcut for that. And again, this can take anywhere from seconds to start to minutes to hours even. And there have been times when HiPerGator is very busy that it really will take a long time. But as we saw here, it was pretty fast. But if it's not launching right away, meaning giving this option, you need to be patient and come back to it later. So I will launch FreeView. And maximize the screen. So the first thing I'm going to do is click on this red hat. And just to make sure I can see the whole path, I'm going to do a couple things. You don't have to do this. This is just, we want to do one of the steps. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to module load FreeSurfer 7.1.1. That's already been loaded because FreeView has been loaded. But I'm just going to do that to simplify a couple of things. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change directory to blue CLP7934 share, and then my directory. And then I have a subjects directory that I've created. And it's being a little bit delayed this morning. There we go. Okay, and then now I'm going to export subjects dir, all in caps, equals $ capital PWD. And that's going to set my subjects directory to the current location. Now, you don't have to do all of that. The one thing, really the one step that you should do would be one like that, where you can just change to your subjects directory. And the reason for that is the graphic user interface sometimes doesn't doesn't show the path to where your files are. And by doing that, you'll make sure that that FreeView can actually see where your files are. Now I'm just going to hide that window, just click back to FreeView. So I will come here, File, Load Volume. You can also push Control O. And in here now, I'm within the subjects directory. Again, I can see the whole path. And so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pick one of these at random. Let's try 12S6073. So I'll go in there, and then I will go into MRI. So now how do we know what to do? What I recommend is looking at the, in the module, what I have is a series of slides that will walk you through some of this. Again, maybe a different brain, but there'll be links to what to look, links to websites that you can use to go through this. There will be the PowerPoint that you can go through to sort of follow along with some things. And the PowerPoint is still loading on my end. But what I want to show you is coming back here to the troubleshooting the output. So what I really recommend is reading through the website. This is, again, linked to in the module. And the kind of what I was doing here, this was mostly done, again, by launching FreeView. This is already done, but I was just exporting subjects directory. I didn't do the tutorial data because, again, that was specific to FreeSurfer tutorial data. But really what we're looking for are various errors: skull stripping errors, segmentation errors, intensity normalization error, peel surface misplacement, and topological defect. And the two that we're really going to focus on would be the skull stripping errors and some of the peel surface misplacement. So this is still loading the PowerPoint. Internet's being kind of slow today. So I'm going to walk through some of this. So really what we want to do is look for, we can follow this, fixing errors, edits to the brain mask volume. So peel surface error. And we'll show you what the peel surface is. So you can run a whole command like this. This is going to be one benefit. So if you run this through the console method, meaning you came over here, interactive apps, console, you started a console session, and then that opens up. There'll be a little command line you can type in. You can do module load FreeSurfer. And if you have all of that, then when you're following these instructions, you can essentially do a copy and paste. Now, this would only work if you're using tutorial data and you've set all of these ones. You don't need to source FreeSurfer. That's that happens when you do module load FreeSurfer on HiPerGator. And then you just have to set these variables, tutorial data, and again, put the path in there, and then export, do all of that. So if you did that, and you're using the tutorial data, you downloaded that to HiPerGator, then you should be able to just copy and paste this command and put it in. So you just copy that in and paste it. I do want to point out, copy and pasting using HiPerGator, using this on-demand service, you can't usually do it directly. So what you have to do is I'm going to copy this. I'll just show you one example. And then I come over here, over on the side, I can have the clipboard. I can paste into the clipboard. And then usually I like to copy that again. And then I can come over and put this in Terminal and paste it in at that point. I can't do a direct paste from my computer to HiPerGator without going through this clipboard first. So I just wanted to show you that. And so it's doing a right click, a middle click can work as well. Some imaging, I actually recommend you have a mouse with a middle, like a scroll wheel, a middle mouse button can help with some of this. But then you should be able to paste it in there. I won't do that because I'm just going to load this the long way. If I wanted to show copy and pasting from your computer to HiPerGator, you have to go through this clipboard. So in this case, again, what we're going to show is in here, we're going to look at the peel surface and really pulling up, editing what we call the brain mask volume. So here they're loading something called t1.mgz and brain mask. So I'm going to do that with this participant. This is, again, not one of the tutorial data. This is somebody that I processed for our class. This is an ADNI participant. But we can go through the MRI folder. There's a T1. So I could click open and OK. And then I'll come back and load another volume. And in that case, it was brain mask. Remember, that was from here, it was loading E1 and brain mask. So we'll click OK. So brain mask is one thing we can use to check the quality of the skull stripping. And let me point out a couple of things on here. So right here, we have some bone right above the eyes, the orbits. So bone and some of the eyes are involved. That's not necessarily a problem. So this would be part of the eye. Here's optic nerve coming out, optic chiasm, optic tract. And that's not necessarily a problem for us. So how do we know if this is a problem or not? What we want to do is we'll come back to here. We want to see what else is being loaded. The surface, the white matter, edge, so that's a gray-white boundary. The peel surface, that's the outer surface of the brain for both hemispheres. And it's making that gray-white boundary, this was called white, left hemisphere dot white. It's making that yellow, left hemisphere peel, outer surface red. We don't have to follow whatever colors you want to do, but that's just what we're loading. So let's load the surface. So I can go to File, Load Surface, and this will automatically go, or should automatically go to the correct folder. So this participant, 126073, 126073. So we need our left hemisphere peel, left hemisphere white, and then the right hemisphere peel, and right hemisphere white. Can click Open. And if we want to match what it has in the tutorial, white is yellow. So this, what's called white, the color is yellow, and then the peel surface is red. So this will default to yellow. And the peel surface was loading as red, so then I can click on that. You don't have to do this, but let me click over there. Getting a little bit of a delayed response. But then I can change the edge color here. So I can click on that yellow edge color and hopefully get the pop-up, and then I can select a different color. In this case, I'll go with the red default. Again, this is being slow because of some internet slowdowns right now. Hopefully it would be a little faster for you. Okay, I had paused the recording while it was loading, and I changed the view to be the coronal view over here, and change this view. You can do whichever view you prefer, but again, I might pause and then jump back depending on the internet speed for me. But what I'm going to show you here is, so I've now opened something like this. So this is a different participant, different subject, but now we have that. And so it's open that. And so what you want to do is you want to scroll through and look for the peel and white surfaces for accuracy. So you want to make sure that you're picking up all the white matter and including only gray matter. Now this takes some knowledge of anatomy, and if you're not sure, then leave it alone. But I'm going to show a couple of examples. And I've done a walkthrough in class showing some of this in other videos. And once you've identified a problem or given up, here's some detailed instructions. So this, again, is specific for the tutorial data, but this will have some examples here. So here is somewhere where it has picked up some meninges, some dura mater, and that's gone out too far. So that's going to be a pretty common error. So let's see if we see any of that in this brain. Again, if you've loaded a different brain, that's fine. I'm just using this one. And so I'm going to scroll through by using the arrow keys in this case. And I really like the coronal view for this. Let me stop here. And then I'm right-clicking and dragging up to zoom in. So this is an area, this is medial temporal lobe, and the rest of this is fine. The hippocampus doesn't get included in here. This is hippocampus right there. And but let me show you something. So right here, there is a thin layer of cortex. And then just next to it, this little bit brighter, these voxels there, that is actually dura mater. That's not part of the brain. And we can see it over here. So this red line really should just go straight up through this darker set of voxels and then connect right up there. And that is where the cortical surface is. And so that's an area that we call the entorhinal cortex. It's a primary input to output, a lot of input to the hippocampus. It's very important for memory. It's an area that shrinks in Alzheimer's disease and to some extent in Parkinson's disease and other neurodegenerative processes will affect that part of the brain. But on a lot of the MRI, and FreeSurfer tends to pick up dura mater right by it. And that's not surprising. They all look about the same, the intensity, but it's technically an error. And so that's an area that could be cleaned up. Let's scroll through some more slices of the brain. I'm going farther back in the brain. Let me zoom out a little bit more so I can see the whole brain. So I would scroll through this. And generally, if you're scrolling through, you wouldn't necessarily go this quick. But I've done a lot of this, and I'm trying to get a kind of a whole view of the brain. Again, we have this area that's really pulling in some of the dura mater. This is dura mater that's around the cerebellum, and so a part of what we call the tentorium cerebelli, but it's dura mater. Again, that's pulling out a little bit too much. And same over here and there. So this is our perihippocampal gyrus. This is fusiform gyrus of the brain. And so those are areas where we do tend to get too much picked up. We can see just a little bit here. I can see it. You might not be able to see it. That's okay. But I just want to point out this really should be more of a straight connection up there. And then I'm looking up higher in the brain as well for looking for similar things. So here's one area where it's jutting out just a little bit too far into dura mater. But overall, this particular brain is okay. It's not really, it's not that bad. I mean, there's certainly some inaccuracies. Notice I jumped and clicked. I wanted to jump to the the front part of the brain. So I could just click over here and it jumped there. And I want to go back because I just want to check this area above the eyes, because that's going to be another, eyes would be here, but now we're moving back. Temporal lobe, so this is dura mater in between. And so that's going to be another area where there can be some problems. So right here, there was a little bit of lag in loading. But again, right here now it is pulling in some dura mater. And so okay, that's something I want to fix. So really what you do is see, okay, that is starting really right there. There's part of the brain, or this is part of the dura mater that's getting labeled as brain. And what I recommend is checking it in multiple views. So you can click right on it and you can look in these other views to try and tell. So the crosshairs right there. And this is an axial view. And in this case, the cortical surface really should end back where this darker line is right there. That should be where the cortical surface is. So we are now jumping outside of the brain, and this is getting labeled as brain. And the same thing is happening right here. And so really what I do, okay, I'm going to focus on this part. So I would find the first step where it's really jumping beyond the cortical surface. So here's the edge, that is accurate. And I go another step, and we see that this is starting to jump out. So how do we fix that? So that's where these instructions occur. So remember, this is linked to in module right here, this click for detailed instructions. They will walk you through how to fix it. And I found this part of the brain because it's actually a very similar issue to what we're seeing here in this tutorial brain. Different brain, similar issue, and that is just showing that this is a type of error that shows up. Now it shows up enough that I'm not overly concerned about it. And so generally what I do is process brains, and then I do a quick scroll through of them. And if it's just a few areas with little bit of error like that, then I generally don't touch it. If I had a really limited sample size, then I'd go through each one, 5, 10, maybe 20 brains. But if we're talking 200 brains or more, which is closer to some of the data, the sample sizes I'm using now, it's just really not feasible from a time standpoint. And so again, that's a trade-off. It's a decision. Maybe it is really important, and so you need to go through and clean it up. But then you also want to hope that you're consistent everywhere, meaning if you're finding that error, are you finding the little errors over there as well and cleaning those up? And so I get an overall view of the brain and then decide how bad is it. Most of the time it's not that bad. It's just a few small areas of one part of the brain. In that case, I generally leave it alone. But you could clean it up, again, at the risk of, you're going to improve accuracy, very likely, but it's also at the risk of introducing user error and some inconsistencies. But let's say we're going to fix it up. That's just part of this assignment. It's just the experience and exposure to looking at the brain and what is brain, what is not brain. And again, you do need to do quality assessment. So you look at the brains as you acquire them. You look at them as your this initial output from FreeSurfer, but then from there need to be some decisions about quality. And some can have much worse quality. Others are going to be just these subtle issues like this. So here you can follow these instructions. So we need to click on Recon Edit button, and this will bring up this window. You can change your brush size, and really what you're going to do is, so we want to make sure that we're editing the brain mask, not T1, and I'll show you that. And then we want to delete some voxels out of that brain mask, so we can hold down the Shift key and use the left mouse button, or if using a trackpad. I do recommend using a mouse if possible on this. It can work with a trackpad though. and then cleaning that up. So hold down Shift to delete. So what does that look like? Okay, so here's an area I'm going to start to delete. So Recon Edit, and notice I have brain mask highlighted. So that's what we want. Recon Edit. I'm going to pull this over. I can change the brush size, and there are different options on here. We won't get to that. There's reasons for those, but change the brush size. We're going to keep it at 1. This is pretty small. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to shift click. Notice again, brain mask is selected. And I'm going to come here and just delete a few of these voxels right there. So in that case, what I'm doing is I'm literally creating little holes in this brain image now, this brain mask, and that's just going to be a purely empty spot in it. And so then we'll be able to save that and reprocess the brain, and there's going to be nothing there. And so FreeSurfer won't try to extend the cortical surface out there. So I think that was it for that, that slice. While I'm here, I'm actually just going to delete a few voxels right here. Those are ones that it was going out through the meninges as well. If you can't see that, don't worry about it. Again, this is just experience to get some more experience. And so then I'm going to go back one more step in the brain. Actually, I'm going to go forward. I could delete a few more from here. And again, this is being kind of slow because of internet things. But over here, this is one I'm going to fix. Again, I'm going to get rid of that. And then all of that can be deleted. And you don't necessarily have to worry about deleting everything. Often it's just enough to delete a little bit out. So when you reprocess, it'll pull in this red line, this cortical surface. And then here, I'm going to delete that layer right there. And so really, again, I would zoom out and I would do this everywhere on this slice. Other hemisphere of the brain, all around. Do this everywhere that it needs to be done. I'll go back. So I was pushing the down arrow. Delete that. All of this needs to go off. And I'm doing this a little bit quickly, but that is cortical surface right there. So now in this case, I just need to delete a little bit right there. And then that will get ignored. Because again, it's going to try to have a continuous cortical surface. So I was deleting that. And again, some of these are being a little nitpicky on this. Keep going back. Then we're mostly out of the problem area now. We still have some showing up right there. Okay, so again, I would keep going back. I would do that everywhere in the brain. So it would go through. So there are things on this other side. Up here is fine. I do recommend checking in 3 dimensions because you could look at this and go, well, that's an error. I just have this random yellow speck. But what we're getting to the white matter, we're going farther back. And so as we go farther back, this yellow area is denoting where the edge of gray matter, white matter is, that is going to start to join together, and we'll have more brain that will appear. And so that's what I recommend checking in all 3 planes, axial, sagittal, coronal, sagittal, axial, to make sure that it really is a problem. And what that problem would be and how to identify it, get that with experience. But again, here's another issue right there. So I'm just going to delete a little stripe right there. And that should hopefully be enough to pull the cortical surface in. So again, repeat that, go through the whole brain, slice by slice, and fix any errors. So that area in the frontal lobes, kind of right over the eyes, is an area where there tends to be issues. The one that I showed earlier, the other one that shows up is down here, temporal lobe. There's some kind of odd things going on here. Ignore that, that's okay. But this is another area just outside the fusiform, and the parahippocampal gyri is another where it tends to pick up too much brain. Again, I would go on each slice and delete, and I would delete a little bit more usually. And that would be, again, that's an example. So that's looking at the peel surface. So that's going through, like the tutorial, going through there. You can make the brush size larger if you want. And then once that's done, you can save the volume. So this is where you need to be careful. Ideally, what you do before you start this is you make a backup of that brain mask file. So that could be as simple as being here in, oh, I lost connection. Hopefully I still try this again. So that could be, let me show you one way to make a backup of the file first. And that is just in case you make an error in the processing, you save it, or your cleanup and you save it, and you kind of realize, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Then what you can do, you can undo. There are ways to undo what you're doing. But, so let me show you this. So this was somebody who I was doing. So I'm going to CD into that directory. And then I can go into MRI. And list the contents. Again, this is just being slow because of internet slowdowns. So the one I'm editing is this brain mask file, this .mgz. So one way to make a backup, I can just copy brain mask.mgz, and then maybe I could copy that up a couple of levels. So again, this is just being slow. So I'm going to pause and brain mask.mgz, and then I'm going to send it up a couple levels. So up one level, I am in a directory called MRI. Up one level would be in that subjects directory, but I want to put it up one more. So up two levels. And in this case, I'm going to call this 012S 6073 unedited brain mask. Of course, don't put spaces in the file names, and you keep the MGZ file extension. So I just made a copy of that before I saved anything. You don't have to do that for this assignment. Just saying in general, if you're going to edit these and you want to make sure that you have the unedited version, you want a copy of that, so you can make a copy of it, put it somewhere. I gave it a name, and then again, if I decided, oh, I don't like the edits that I made to this brain mask, let's get rid of the edited one, put the unedited one back in there, and I could do the same thing. I could copy that file into this current directory, but I would just save it as brainmask.mgz instead of this new name. And so let's say I did all the editing for this step. What I can do is get rid of that recon edit, and then I still have brain mask highlighted, and then I will go to File and Save. And this is being slow, so I'm going to pause for a little bit. Okay, the menu loaded. So then I can go here to save volume. The other way to make a backup is you can load that brain mask. I could do save volume as, and then I could just rename it there and then go through and load up the brain mask again. That's another way. But I like the edits I did, so I will save volume. And that'll just take a minute. Okay, so that is saved now. And let's say that was all the edits that this brain needed, and which is probably true in this case. The other common edit, well, before I get to that, the other common one is adding what we call control points. So there's instructions for regenerating the surface. I'll come back to that. And we'll do that. So the other one that happens is just white matter volume. We can get segmentation error or white surface error. And so let's just look at these detailed instructions here. This would be the tutorial. Again, so you can go through this. But here's someone where it's the white surface, in this case blue line, doesn't follow the surface of the brain. This particular brain has a lot of damage inside the white matter, and damage to the white matter, and that's causing some issues with the processing. And so again, it's saying the cortical surface, that little red dot right there, but this blue, like the white matter, this blue-white, sorry, the blue is denoting the gray-white boundary. And that is saying that's an area where that's the end of the white matter, and so it's causing like this hole in the brain. And you can see that on a cortical surface there. So you can follow the instructions and go through and edit the white matter. This would be similar, but in this case, instead of editing brain mask, you can do edit white matter, and you're going to fill in. And so there's examples of this. I'm not going to recreate this. The particular brain that I'm using didn't have this issue. But again, that's part of the looking through. You're looking at the cortical surface, you're looking at the white matter boundary, and can edit that. The other one that happens is you can get issues with the white surface error. And so here would be an example right there. Let me zoom in. So if we look closely at this brain, it's saying, so red in this case, that's the cortical surface. It's saying it's ending right there. But the reality is this gyrus extends down toward the cerebellum down here. Again, this is why we start out this class. It was very quick, just did an overview of the brain and brain anatomy, but you need to know brain anatomy to really understand if these are processed correctly. And so this is an area where the FreeSurfer processing, so recon all, that command, didn't really understand that the white matter continues on. And so in this case, what you need to do is, there are different ways you can do it. You can draw in white matter by hand. So again, this is loading in brain mask and then this white matter, and select white matter, and then you can draw in some white matter down there. And that's showing what it looks like. It's saying there's a hole right there. But you can draw in some white matter and then do reprocessing. So again, they're walking you through it. I'm not going to recreate all of these. These tutorials are really excellent and much better than existed some years back when I was learning all of this. So that's often what I do anyway, is when I'm going through the brains, I just open up these web pages, these different tutorials, so I can remind myself how to do this. And so that's white matter and going through and editing. And so they give that example in there. And then once you're all done, you save that, and then you can reprocess this. So now that's a command that ideally you would run, or that you should run in a script, meaning, okay, I've edited this person or these 10 individuals, the brains, and then you run this command, again, subject ID, or that can be just a -s, and then you put in the appropriate subject. So in this case, for me, if I had done this step, I would put in, for subject, I would put in this particular subject 012_s_6073. And so that's not going to reprocess, run all of the recon all step. It's just going to go from this step on and then fix it. It'll count the fixes that you made. It'll account for those and reprocess, regenerate cortical surface. So that's another one. And then another one, what happens is, this is the other one that I've seen issues with before, is needing to add control points. So I'll show an example of this, because these other ones are, you're editing a different volume, so either brain mask or the white matter.mgz, but this is one where you're going to add what we call control points. And so here's an area where they're showing there's quite a bit of white matter that's excluded. And so that side is okay. This could technically extend out a little bit more, but we're not going to worry about that. That's just a minor issue, and it's kind of this transition between gray matter, white matter, and so there's a little bit of uncertainty there. But here there's some pretty clear, like here's a whole gyrus, and here's a whole gyrus that should be picked up. So this side is getting picked up okay, but this side is not. And so this is another one where you can follow these instructions. And again, if you're using tutorial data, it would be this exact same brain. If you're using your own data or the data for the class, then you just change the participants, all of this, to the appropriate ones. So add control points. We first need to click File, New Point Set, and then we can call it control.dat. It's a text file, but just the extension of dat. And verify control point option is selected. Template volume is brain mask. So we're going to edit the brain mask. Click OK. So what does that look like? So File, New Point Set, control.dat. File. And then we need to do the new point set right here. These will be control points, brain mask, and so I'm just going to call this control.dat and hit OK. And that should create this text file. And these will just essentially be little coordinates that FreeSurfer, when you're processing or reprocessing, it will understand that it needs to extend white matter into these areas. Now, right here, so control dat, and then right there, notice that that is now selected. So if I open up the instructions, you add these points. So that's all you're doing. It's just little points in areas that you say this is definitely white matter. And if it's not, then you can throw off all sorts of processing. But you would add the points like that. And if there's a big lesion, say somebody had a tumor and that was throwing things off, edit the white matter, don't use control points. This is just what this is telling FreeSurfer is that it needs to make the intensity of these closer to, there's a standard, this 110. It's just a value intensity. It's saying white matter has a value of 110 in here. And so it's going to try to make all of these 110 or really close to 110. And so then you could just, this is selected, and then I can just add some points. Now I'm going to look through this brain, can scroll through it with the arrow keys, and I would say, okay, here is somewhere that was excluded. Let's see if there is anything in here. This brain actually processed pretty well. Wait for it to catch up. And anyway, we'll just pretend here that this did not have a, this didn't extend out as white matter. So I could click and add a control point. Okay, so it added that control point right there. And then I could save this. It should automatically save, but I don't want to assume that it's going to automatically save. And so then I can click on save. Let's say I went through, there was this one area, and I can save that. So that's what that process would look like. This brain really doesn't need any of it. I checked earlier, and there's a couple of parts we could fix, but not enough to worry about. And but some brains, there was one I'd done a case report on for a study that had been missing a lot of the temporal lobe. Okay, so that was saved. So then if we look at the instructions and you get the control points added, here's the command to run. And if you've done the different editing, so let's say we've added control points, you can run that step and do all that. And then as you can see, so there was the before, and then here was the after for the tutorial data, and that will fix a lot of the issues. So that's reviewing the data, the output, and we're not going to worry about the skull stripping. That can be an issue. I haven't seen it yet really be a problem. And what we mean by skull stripping problem is more of not this excess, like here's eye that's left on there and some skull and other things. But in that case, it's okay because we still have the whole brain. We have a little bit more than the brain. And then the cortical surface is really not going out too far. We have a little bit of that. And we fixed that with with some editing, and I could edit over here as well, the brain mask, and reprocess that step, but really not a huge issue. Let me go back and save the brain mask just to make sure that was saved. So save volume, that's already saved, so we're okay. So in this case, I'm going to exit out of this. So if I close this, if I close free view, it will kill the session. So I'm going to close that, and I'm going to look at my interactive sessions, and I still have this running. All right, it's done. This is just for debugging if there are issues. So this was there. So if you had some problems, you could contact the HiPerGator IT team. But because I quit free view, meaning I clicked on the X, then it actually ended this session. So that's gone. Let's come back here. And okay, so I edited this brain. Go to MRI, and then this brain mask. And here's sort of this unedited one that is making a backup as well. But this brain mask, let's figure out, okay, if I need to reprocess this, let's say that was really all I needed. The control points, I'm going to ignore that. And that can be an issue. But here, we edited the brain mask. And really to fix the surface of the brain, that cortical outer layer, it was going into meninges. And there was a lot more I could have done with this brain. So how do we fix it? Then we run this command. But it would be, you just modify it, of course, to get the correct subject. So let me show you a way to run this so you don't necessarily have to run a whole script. So you can, that's what I recommend, but there is a way to do an interactive sort of session. And The downside to this is really you would need to keep your window open for it, meaning if you close out of this, it might end the session, which is why I don't recommend it. But if your computer's stable and you don't think it's going to crash, it shouldn't cause a problem necessarily if the window closed, but it's safer to do the whole script and do a SBatch and submit. And so what is in that script, it literally would just be the header information, module load, FreeSurfer, change directory into your subjects directory. You do export subjects directory to equal that directory, and then you run the command like this. But let me just show you the other way. So the website I like, help.rc.ufl.edu. Why do I like this? There's a lot of good resources for HiPerGator, but this interactive development and testing, if you need a little bit more resources, and so we're going to reprocess, and maybe this reprocessing is going to take 4 hours. I'm not sure how long it's going to take. But you could request an interactive session, and so I can copy and paste this. I'm actually going to go up a couple levels. So I am now in my subjects directory, and let's say I wanted to reprocess 126073, and I didn't want to write the whole script. I just needed to run that one command. So I can do an interactive session. And what this did is 8 hours, 4 gigabytes of RAM, and now this is interactive session. So I can module load FreeSurfer. I'm going to do 7.1.1, and then export subjects dir, and I'm already in that location, so I can make that equal to this variable called present working directory. And so now I am, just to check if we want to verify that that really worked, subjects dir is where I am. And so we had done edits to this participant, and I had cleaned up the white matter a little bit. And so what I can do, again, is coming back to the instructions here that are linked to, and we just need this command, recon all. So I can copy, I'm just going to copy that first point up to that point and not everything. I'll paste that in, and so the subject ID in this case is that participant. And so that would be the command to regenerate the cortical surface. And I would hit enter and it would run. So I would keep, in this case, because I'm doing this interactively, I would keep this window up and everything just to be safe. I haven't tested what would happen if I leave the window. Not meaning I could click over to something else, but not close the tab. But that would be reprocessing. But again, I recommend just using a script. So if you have one that you use to process, so one of the ones in your, if you have a code directory or whatever, wherever your script is for your initial processing of FreeSurfer, you can just make a copy of that, edit it, instead of running that recon all -s and then the -i and then you have the path to that nifty file and then -all, you would do this recon all and just replace that command with this. And you have if you have your edited brain mask, it would recognize that and it would do the reprocessing and fix the issues. And this should be relatively quick. It could be anywhere from minutes to some hours. I would assume it's going to take some hours. So that was fixing some errors with FreeSurfer. Again, spend time with the tutorial for the homework. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Now, I'm not going to run this. I was just showing you if you want to run that interactively, then this is a way to do it. I could hit enter, return, and it would start reprocessing. And then I could come back to it in some hours and hopefully it would be done.